Do you know who Paul was? Welcome to Granny's GodPod number 7, hopefully giving you some information you don't already know. Before we get started, please do press the like and subscribe so you're notified of the next one in the series. Paul was a Greek-speaking Jew from Asia Minor, born between 2 to 6 years after the birth of Christ. Paul's Hebrew name was Saul, and he spoke Hebrew to the crowd in Acts 22 verse 2. It was not uncommon in those days to have two names, one Hebrew and one Greek. Paul was a Roman citizen, born in the Roman city of Tarsus, the same city where Cleopatra staged a colourful first meeting with Mark Antony. Roughly 50 years later, Paul was born in that same city, located in what is today southern Turkey. In Acts 21 verse 39, he speaks of his native city to a Roman soldier, saying, "I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no obscure city." Tarsus was a major city in eastern Cilicia, a region that had been made part of the Roman province of Syria by the time Paul was an adult. In Acts 22 verse 3, Paul says he was born in Tarsus but brought up in the city of Jerusalem and educated by Gamaliel according to zealous Jewish traditions. As well as a good education, Paul learned a trade, tent making. Paul's native province of Cilicia was well known for producing and exporting a goat hair cloth sought after for making tents. The cloth was woven from the long hair of a particular breed of goat native to the area. Later in life, when Paul went to Corinth, he met a Jew called Aquila and his wife Priscilla, who had arrived from Italy because Claudius had expelled all Jews from Rome. Paul stayed with them because they were tent makers by trade. While in Jerusalem, in Acts 23 verse 6, we are told that Paul was a Pharisee, as was his father. And in Acts 23 verse 16, we see how he is saved from a plot against his life by his sister and his nephew. We also know something of Paul's ancient ancestry. In Romans 1 verse 1, Paul says he is an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, and a member of the tribe of Benjamin. Genesis tells us Benjamin was the second son of Rachel and Jacob. He may have been named after King Saul, another distant relative, since Paul came from a devout Jewish family. King Saul was the first king of Israel and also of the lineage of Benjamin. After the crucifixion, the Pharisees expected the Jesus movement to die out, but it didn't. And Saul, a zealous Pharisee, was active in persecuting Christians, continuing the Pharisaic efforts to keep control of their religion. They understood, towards the end of his ministry, that Jesus was claiming equality with God, which was blasphemy to them. Most people have heard of Saul's conversion on the Damascus Road, which happened within a year or two of Jesus' resurrection. Saul was travelling to Damascus in Syria to find and imprison worshippers of Jesus, when a light from heaven flashed around him, and he heard the voice of Jesus say, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Here I must dispel an accusation of conflict between the two accounts of Saul's conversion. In Acts 9 verse 4, the men who were with him heard the voice but saw no one. In Acts 22 verse 7, the men did not understand the words that were spoken. It does not say in the first account the men heard the words, and in the second account the men did not hear the words. After his miraculous conversion experience, Saul began preaching with a boldness that changed history, but he was still known as Saul for some time. After his baptism, he was with the disciples in Damascus for some days. Later, Barnabas found Saul in Tarsus and took him to Antioch in Syria, where they remained for a year, where the disciples were first called Christians. Barnabas and Saul were sent to deliver relief in Judea during a famine, returning to Antioch with John Mark. Then Barnabas and Saul were sent as missionaries to Cyprus. And here, in Acts 13 verse 7, is the first mention of Saul being otherwise known as Paul. The Gentiles in Cyprus were largely Greek-speaking, so his Greek name would be more familiar. And from then on, Luke, the author of Acts, calls him Paul. Paul wrote more than half of the New Testament over a period of 17 years, and about half of that was written over a period of 3 years, from 61 to 63 AD. During this time, he wrote Philemon, Colossians, Ephesians, Philippians, Hebrews, 1 Timothy, and Titus. He wrote 4 of these letters in prison. We know that 2 Timothy was written while Paul was in a Roman prison from 66 to 67 AD, not long after the burning of Rome in 64 AD. An early church historian, Eusebius, wrote that Paul was beheaded by the order of the Roman Emperor Nero. Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians is dated the earliest book in the New Testament, to about 49 to 50 AD. So within 20 years of the crucifixion, Gentiles were worshipping Jesus as the unique Son of God. What caused these Gentiles to abandon their worship of their pagan gods, Zeus, Hermes, Artemis, etc., to worship a Jew who had been crucified and buried? A dead Messiah would be a useless Messiah. Only Jesus' resurrection would convince these people to convert. If the resurrection had not happened, there would have been no reason to abandon the pagan gods. Thanks for listening. See you next time.